Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was the Speed Force's true chosen over the Flash. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was a cacophony of heat, screams, and the putrid, cloying stench of sewage mixed with burnt sugar. For Izuku Midoriya, it was the soundtrack to his own inadequacy. His legs, thin and wiry, pumped uselessly against the pavement, each stride a testament to his foolishness. He shouldn't be here. He shouldn't be running. The pro-heroes had told him to stay back. All Might himself, his idol, the symbol of peace, had told him he couldn't be a hero without a quirk. And yet, here he was. His lungs burned, screaming for air he couldn't seem to find. His school bag, a ridiculous yellow thing that suddenly felt like it was filled with lead, slapped against his back with every desperate step. He'd thrown it, of course. A desperate, pathetic gesture. One of his notebooks had flown out, the one titled Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13, its pages fluttering open for a split second to reveal his own frantic scrawls before it was swallowed by the churning, viscous mass of the sludge villain. The villain was an abomination of green, gelatinous filth, a living sewer with two massive, malevolent eyes floating in its depths. And trapped within it, suffocating, was Katsuki Bakugo, Kaken, his childhood friend. His tormentor. The one who had told him to take a swan dive off the roof just a few hours ago. And his eyes, through the swirling sludge, Izuku could see Kaken's eyes. They were wide, terrified, and pleading. It wasn't the look of the proud, explosive rival he knew. It was the look of a drowning boy. It was the look of someone asking for help. That was all it took. One look. Before his brain could process the futility of it all, before his well-honed sense of self-preservation could scream its final, logical protest, Izuku's legs were moving on their own. "Get back here, you idiot! You'll get yourself killed!" Kamui Woods yelled from the sidelines, his wooden limbs still smoldering from Bakugo's earlier explosions. Death Arms was trying to get a handle on the situation, but every attempt to punch the villain was like striking water. The other heroes were evacuating civilians, containing the fires, doing everything except what needed to be done, because none of them had the right quirk to handle a fluid, amorphous enemy who was also a walking bomb. Izuku didn't have a quirk at all. What am I doing? The thought screamed in his mind, a frantic, high-pitched wail of pure terror. I can't do anything. I'm just going to die. But his legs didn't stop. He clawed his way forward, his fingers digging into the semi-solid body of the villain. It was like trying to climb a mountain of warm, disgusting jelly. The villain's attention swiveled towards him, its massive eyes focusing on the new, insignificant gnat that dared to approach. Another little meat shield? The villain's voice gurgled, a foul sound that seemed to bubble up from its core. Perfect. I'll just absorb you too. A tendril of sludge lashed out, and Izuku scrambled back, his foot slipping on the slick ground. He fell hard, the impact jarring his teeth. He looked up, and all he could see was the green mass descending upon him, blocking out the sky. This is it. This is how I die. Pathetic, useless, quirkless Deku, dying for nothing. From the edge of the crowd, a gaunt, skeletal man watched in horror. Toshinori Yagi, in his withered form, felt a familiar, agonizing pressure in his side. Steam was already beginning to hiss from his skin as he fought against his body's limits, trying to force the transformation. Just a few more seconds. I need just a few more seconds. But his body refused. He had lectured the boy, told him the cold, hard truth of the world. He had seen the hope shatter in those wide, green eyes. And now, that same boy was doing what no one else would. He was acting like a true hero. Toshinori's heart clenched. He had been wrong. So terribly, fundamentally wrong. A hero wasn't just about power. It was about this. This reckless, illogical, beautiful act of self-sacrifice. And he, the number one hero, was powerless to help. Stop it, Kaken! Izuku screamed, his voice cracking with desperation as he clawed at the sludge imprisoning Bakugo's face. His nails scraped, finding no purchase. Don't let it beat you. For a moment, Bakugo's eyes met his. The terror was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Confusion. Rage. Indignity. The idea that Deku, of all people, was trying to save him was an insult worse than the villain's attack. "Get off me!" Bakugo choked out, setting off another series of muffled explosions within the sludge, rocking the creature but doing little to free himself. The villain laughed, a sickening, wet sound. "Nice try, kids. It's over." The descending tendril was inches from Izuku's face. He closed his eyes, a single, hot tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. "I'm sorry, Mom." And then, the world stopped screaming. Across the unfathomable chasm of the multiverse, a river of pure energy flowed. It was not a river of water, but of motion, of potential, of time itself. It was the speed force, a sentient, quasi-physical law that bound the cosmos together. It was the source of all kinetic energy, the engine of reality. And it was looking for a champion. It was a delicate process. The chosen one, its avatar, needed to be a precise blend of character and circumstance. A vessel capable of containing infinity without shattering, a heart pure enough to wield creation without being corrupted. For eons, it had its champions, its flashes, men and women who ran the razor's edge of existence. But its last great avatar was gone, faded into the force itself, and the time had come to choose another. Its consciousness, a thing of pure vibration and light, rippled across the dimensions. It brushed against countless worlds, countless lives, countless souls. It saw heroes forged in alien suns, gods born of myth, vigilantes shrouded in darkness. They were powerful, noble, strong. But they were not right. They had their own power, their own destinies already written in the stars of their respective universes. The Speed Force needed a new beginning. An empty vessel. Then it found one. On a world it designated as Earth 1, in a city called Central City, a young man named Barry Allen was working late. He was a forensic scientist, a man of logic and reason, but with a dreamer's heart. He was haunted by the impossible, the murder of his mother by a blur of lightning, a tragedy that had defined his life and set him on a path of seeking justice. He was good. He was kind. He was clever. His heart held a deep well of compassion, and his mind was sharp enough to one day comprehend the cosmic physics he would be forced to command. The Speed Force focused its attention. The atmospheric conditions were perfect. A storm was brewing, a concoction of meteorological happenstance and cosmic design. A particle accelerator in the city was about to go online, priming the local reality with exotic energies. A shelf of chemicals stood in Barry's lab, a random assortment that, when supercharged, would act as the catalyst. Everything was aligned. The choice was made. Barry Allen would be the Flash. The Speed Force gathered its energy. It pulled from its infinite wellspring, twisting a tendril of its own being into a singular, targeted bolt of lightning. It was more than electricity. It was an anointment. It was destiny, aimed and ready to fire. The bolt began its descent, arcing through the storm clouds above Central City, homing in on the CSI's laboratory window. But just as the lightning was about to tear through the glass, to strike the shelf and baptize its chosen in a shower of chemicals and cosmic power, the Speed Force hesitated. Its perception, spanning all of time and space, had caught something. A flicker in another reality, on another Earth. It was not the steady, warm glow of a good man's potential, like Barry Allen's. This was something else entirely. It was a pinprick of light that was, in its own way, brighter than a sun. Curious, the Speed Force shifted a fraction of its focus. It saw a street in a city called Muzutafu. It saw fire, sludge, and fear. And in the center of it all, it saw a boy. A boy with no power, no special abilities. Genetically, he was a relic, a throwback to a bygone era. He was physically weak, emotionally fragile, and by every metric of his world, he was a failure. And he was running towards certain death to save his tormentor. The Speed Force did not perceive emotion in the human sense, but it understood the fundamental forces of the universe. It understood sacrifice. It understood love. It understood hope. Barry Allen possessed these things, yes. He would have been a great hero. But his heroism was predicated on a foundation of strength, intellect, and a desire for justice born of personal tragedy. This boy, Izuku Midoriya, was different. His heroism was born from nothing. It was a fundamental, irreducible part of his soul. He possessed a level of pure, unadulterated self-sacrifice that the Speed Force had never encountered. He was running to his doom with absolutely zero chance of success, armed with nothing but the conviction that it was the right thing to do. He was not trying to win. He was not trying to be a hero. He was simply trying to save someone. It was a supernova of will contained in the frailest of vessels. The logical choice was Barry Allen. The man of science, the steady hand. The right choice was Izuku Midoriya. The boy with the unrelenting heart. The Speed Force was the source of all forward momentum. And in that single, eternal moment, it knew that no soul in any universe was more dedicated to moving forward, against all odds, than the quirkless boy in Yuzurifu. The decision was instantaneous. The bolt of lightning destined for Central City, USA, Earth 1, swerved. It did not swerve in the physical sense. It swerved through the very fabric of reality. With a sound that was neither sound nor silence, it tore a hole through the dimensional barrier. It left Barry Allen's reality behind, a ghost of a destiny that would never be, and hurtled through the cosmic void. It was no longer just lightning. It was a declaration. A choice. It screamed across the space between worlds, its golden white energy a stark contrast to the dark void. It saw its target, the boy on the ground, eyes squeezed shut, bracing for an end that was now never going to come. The universe held its breath. The smell of ozone flooded Izuku's senses. The gurgling of the villain, the shouts of the crowd, the crackle of the fires, it all vanished, replaced by a single, impossibly loud hum. It wasn't a sound he heard with his ears. He felt it in his bones, in his teeth, in the very marrow of his being. Time, which had been moving with agonizing slowness, now seemed to crystallize. The descending tendril of sludge hung in the air, a grotesque sculpture of filth. A drop of sweat on Bakugo's brow was a perfect, suspended sphere. The tear on Izuku's own cheek stopped its descent. He opened his eyes. The sky above him had been ripped open. Not like a cloud parting, but like a page being torn from a book. Through the tear, he didn't see blue sky or gray clouds. He saw a storm of pure, liquid gold energy, a celestial sea of impossible power. And from its heart, a single, brilliant bolt of lightning was descending directly upon him. It was beautiful. And it was the most terrifying thing he had ever seen. He didn't have time to scream. He didn't have time to move. He only had time to watch his destiny, rerouted from another man in another world, came to claim him. The lightning struck. Pain was the first sensation. A white-hot, all-consuming agony that felt like every atom in his body was being torn apart and simultaneously set on fire. It was the pain of being unmade. He felt his consciousness fray, his memories scattering like leaves in a hurricane. He saw flashes, images that weren't his own. A man in a red suit with lightning bolts on his ears, running with a smile. An older man with a silver helmet like a Roman god, his feet winged with mercury. A city of gleaming towers under a red sun. A dark, twisted version of the red-suited man, his eyes glowing with malevolent crimson light. It was a billion lifetimes of information, a history of speed and legacy, being crammed into the mind of a 14-year-old boy. The pain was unbearable, and then it changed. The agony became ecstasy. The feeling of being torn apart was replaced by the sensation of being rebuilt, perfected. The lightning wasn't destroying him, it was rewriting him. Every cell, every strand of DNA, was being infused with the raw, untamable energy of the Speed Force. The hum in his bones became a song, a symphony of kinetic potential. He could feel the spin of the planet on its axis. He could feel the frantic vibration of the molecules in the air around him. He could feel the light from the sun striking the pavement. He felt everything. And he felt it all at once. The energy surged through him, looking for an outlet. And it found one. From Izuku's small, prone form, a shockwave of golden energy erupted outwards. It was not an explosion of force, like one of Bakugo's blasts. It was an explosion of pure kinetics. The air itself was superheated and hyper-accelerated, creating a dome of shimmering, golden power. The sludge villain didn't even have time to register what was happening. One moment, it was looming over its new victim. The next, its entire being was subjected to forces it could not comprehend. The kinetic energy shockwave struck it, and the villain's gelatinous body was instantly vaporized. Every single molecule of its form was accelerated to an impossible speed, breaking its molecular bonds and turning it into a cloud of rapidly dissipating, superheated steam. There was no splatter, no remains. Just a loud crack boom that shattered every window for 3 blocks, and then, nothing. The golden dome of energy collapsed back into Izuku, and for a moment, an eerie silence fell over the street, broken only by the tinkle of falling glass. The smoke cleared. Where the sludge villain and a terrified, quirkless boy had been, there was now a shallow crater. The asphalt cracked and fused into glassy black patterns, like a fossilized lightning strike, and in the center of it, Izuku Midoriya stood. He was no longer on the ground. He was on his feet, though he didn't remember standing up. His school uniform was tattered and smoking. His green hair seemed to crackle with static, standing on end. His body, from head to toe, was wreathed in arcs of brilliant, golden lightning that danced and fizzed across his skin, harmlessly illuminating him in a divine aura. His eyes, once a simple, gentle green, now glowed with the same inner light, like twin emerald suns. He looked down at his hands, watching the lightning play across his fingers, his mind a total, blank slate of shock. Bakugo was on the ground a few feet away, coughed out by the villain in its final moments. He pushed himself up, his body aching, his throat raw. He coughed up a final glob of sludge and wiped his mouth, his ears ringing. He looked towards the crater, his crimson eyes widening in utter, soul-shaking disbelief. Deku! He rasped, his voice barely a whisper. He saw the lightning. He saw the glowing eyes. He saw the impossible power radiating from the one person in the world he had always considered less than nothing. A pebble. A bug to be squashed under his shoe, and that pebble had just wielded the power of a god. The world Bakugo had built for himself, a world where he was at the top, where strength was everything, and where Deku was the worthless bottom feeder, did not just crack. It was obliterated. It was atomized as surely as the villain had been. This wasn't a late-blooming quirk. Quirks didn't do that. This was something else. Something impossible. The crowd was silent, their phones lowered, their mouths agape. The pro-heroes stared, their training, their experience, their entire understanding of how powers worked, rendered utterly useless in the face of what they had just witnessed. All Might, still in his skeletal form, felt the steam on his skin die down. The shock of the moment was so profound it had frozen his transformation. He saw the boy standing in the crater, wreathed in celestial fire. He had seen Izuku's spirit, the heart of a true hero beating in a powerless chest. And it seemed, in that moment, that the universe itself had seen it too, and had answered. This was not a quirk. This was a miracle. Izuku's head swam. The symphony in his cells was fading, the connection to the infinite stream of energy receding. The cosmic knowledge, the flashes of other lives, were slipping away, leaving behind only a phantom echo and a throbbing headache. The golden lightning flickering around him began to sputter, the arcs becoming smaller, less frequent. His glowing eyes dimmed, returning to their normal, expressive green. He looked at his hands again, then at the crater he was standing in, then at Bakugo, who was staring at him with an expression of horrified awe he had never seen before. Keikaken, Izuku managed to say, his voice weak. Are you okay? The concern in his voice, so genuine, so Deku, was the final blow to Bakugo's crumbling psyche. He had just been saved by a miracle, and the source of that miracle was asking if he was okay. What? Bakugo started, his voice trembling with a cocktail of rage, fear, and confusion so potent it left him dizzy. What was that? DKU. What the hell was that? The question hung in the air, but Izuku had no answer. The sheer, overwhelming flood of energy that had rewritten his existence had taken its toll. His body, still fundamentally human, had been pushed far beyond its designed limits. His impossibly fast metabolism was already screaming for fuel he didn't have. The last remnants of the golden lightning vanished from his skin. The world tilted violently. Black spots danced in his vision. His legs, which a moment ago felt like they could run to the edge of the universe and back, turned to jelly. With a soft sigh, Izuku's eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed, unconscious, into the crater that marked the site of his impossible birth as something new. Something more. Thousands of miles and one-dimensional barrier away, in Central City, the storm raged. Barry Allen hummed to himself, meticulously cataloging evidence from a recent break-in. He was late, as usual. Iris had called him twice, her teasing voice a warm spot in his otherwise dreary, rain-soaked evening. He promised he'd be done soon. Just one more tray of samples to log. He moved across his lab, a space of controlled chaos filled with beakers, microscopes, and cold case files. The skylight above him rattled as a particularly strong gust of wind hit the CCPD building. Rain lashed against the glass. It was then that he felt it. It wasn't a sound or a vibration. It was a feeling deep in his gut. A sudden, inexplicable sense of loss. It was the same hollow feeling he got when he tried to recall his mother's face clearly, or when he thought about the father he couldn't exonerate. But this was different. It was less personal, more cosmic, like the universe had just skipped a beat. He stumbled, his hand catching the edge of his workstation to steady himself. A phantom jolt, a static charge with no source, ran up his spine. For a fraction of a second, the air in the lab felt thin, and the scent of ozone and something ancient, like the air before creation, filled his nostrils. And then, it was gone. The storm continued to rage outside. The rain continued to fall. Everything was exactly as it had been a moment before. But something was different. Something had changed. Barry shook his head, rubbing his temples. Too much coffee, not enough sleep. That had to be it. He glanced up at the skylight, then over at the chemical shelf against the far wall. The window next to it was slightly ajar, letting in a fine mist of rain. He walked over and closed it, his hand resting on the cool glass. He stood there for a moment, looking out at the storm. He had this strange, nagging feeling that he was supposed to have been standing right here. That if he had been a minute earlier, or a minute later, his life would be completely different. The feeling of a misconnection, of a destiny that had approached, brushed against his life, and then veered away into the unknown, was overwhelming. He sighed, dismissing it as a flight of fancy. He was a man of science, of evidence and facts. There was no room for vague, cosmic feelings. He turned away from the window and went back to his work, the name Iris West already forming on his lips as he planned his apology for being late. He never knew that in that moment, he was a mystery and a tragedy all at once. The man who was supposed to become a legend, the chosen champion who was never chosen, the Flash who would never be. A universe away, a quirkless boy with a hero's heart lay unconscious, his body already beginning to heal at an impossible rate, dreaming of golden lightning and the endless horizon of the open road. His race had just begun. The first thing Izuku Midoriya became aware of was a sound. A rhythmic, impossibly fast beeping that seemed to drill directly into his skull. It was a frantic, urgent tempo, like a hummingbird's heartbeat. His own. He pried his eyes open, the fluorescent lights of the hospital room searing his retinas. The world was a smear of white and pale green. The smell was antiseptic sterile, a clean chemical scent that scraped the inside of his nose. He was lying on a cot that was too stiff, covered by a sheet that was too thin. A hospital? Right, the villain. Kaken. And then, the lightning. The memories rushed back, not as a coherent timeline but as a chaotic flood of sensory overload. The gurgle of the sludge, the terror in Bakugo's eyes, the smell of ozone, the feeling of being unmade and remade by a storm of pure gold. He instinctively tried to sit up, a gasp escaping his lips. Izuku! Oh, my baby! His mother, Inko Midoriya, was there in an instant, her hands hovering over him, afraid to touch. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, her face a mess of tear-streaked relief. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Mom? What happened? Is Kaken okay? He asked, his voice raspy. He's fine, sweetie. He's fine. She sobbed, finally letting her hand rest on his forehead. The doctor said he just had some minor scrapes and smoke inhalation. But you, oh Izuku. You were unconscious. The heroes brought you here. They said there was a villain, and a freak lightning strike. Behind his mother, a doctor cleared his throat. He was a tall man with tired eyes and a clipboard that he held like a shield. Midoriya-san. Glad to see you're awake. I'm Dr. Takeda. You gave us all quite a scare. My son. Inko said, turning to him, her voice trembling. Is he all right? They said the lightning hit him directly. Dr. Takeda's expression was a carefully constructed mask of professional calm, but Izuku could see the deep-seated confusion behind it. Physically, he's remarkable. No burns, no neurological damage. In fact, he's in perfect health. Almost impossibly so. He tapped his pen on the clipboard. That's what's so baffling. We ran every test we could. We did a full genetic scan for a quirk factor, as is standard for incidents like these. The results were the same as every other test you've had since you were 4, Midoriya-kun. You're quirkless. The word, once a death sentence to his dreams, now just felt wrong. Inaccurate. He felt the phantom crackle of energy under his skin, a low hum that was now a constant companion. But that's not the strangest part. The doctor continued, leaning forward slightly. Your metabolic rate is extraordinary. We have you on a high-calorie intravenous drip, and you're burning through it faster than a pro hero with a high-energy transformation quirk. Your heart rate, even at rest, is consistently over 150 beats per minute, yet it shows no signs of strain. Your body is healing from its exhaustion at a rate I've never seen outside of a high-end regeneration quirk. Frankly, from a medical standpoint, nothing about you makes any sense. Izuku looked down at his hands. They looked the same. Freckled, a little callous from his workout routines. But they felt different. They felt like coiled springs, buzzing with a restless energy that made the simple act of lying still feel like a monumental effort. A soft knock came at the door, and a gaunt, skeletal man with sunken eyes and a shock of blonde hair peeked in. It was All Might's other form. Tashinori Yagi. Pardon me, he said, giving a weak, apologetic cough. I was with the police giving a statement. I heard the young man was awake. I wanted to see how he was doing. Inko bowed her head slightly. Thank you for your concern. This is my son Izuku. Tashinori's eyes, hollow as they were, fixed on Izuku with an unnerving intensity. They held a storm of emotions, guilt, awe, confusion, and a desperate, burning curiosity. Young man, he said, his voice a low rasp. What you did back there, running in when no one else would, was incredibly foolish. But it was also, undeniably heroic. Izuku's heart swelled. This was the second time he'd heard praise from his idol, and it felt just as earth-shattering as the first. I couldn't just stand there. Izuku mumbled, his cheeks flushing. I know, Tashinori said softly. He glanced at the doctor and Inko, before looking back at Izuku. The question was unspoken but clear in his eyes. What happened? What was that power? Izuku could only shake his head slightly. He had no answer. He didn't know if it was a quirk that had been hidden deep inside him, awakened by the lightning, or if the lightning itself had given him something. The latter seemed impossible, a fantasy from pre-quirk comic books. But the former didn't feel right either. This power didn't feel like a part of his body. It felt like his body was a container for something infinitely larger. He was discharged 2 days later. The official report listed him as a miraculous survivor of a high-energy atmospheric event, with the side effects of a permanently accelerated metabolism and heart rate. The doctors gave his mother a complex dietary plan usually reserved for Olympic athletes, and told them to come back if he started glowing again. It was the best they could do. Walking home felt strange. The world seemed loud, sluggish. The cars crawling by in traffic felt like snails. The chatter of pedestrians was a low, drawn-out drone. Everything was moving in slow motion, and it was setting his teeth on edge. He just wanted to run. The moment of discovery came, as it often does, with the sound of shattering glass. Izuku was helping his mother with the dishes, his hands still feeling clumsy and oversized, buzzing with that relentless energy. His mind was racing, 1,000 thoughts a second. What is this power? Can I control it? Is it a quirk? Did the universe just decide to give me one? Why me? What did All Might think? Is Kaken okay? He looked so angry, but also scared. Was he scared of the villain or scared of me? His thoughts were a high-speed train, and his body was struggling to keep up. His hand twitched, a reflexive jerk, and the glass he was drying slipped from his fingers. Oh! Inko gasped. Izuku's head snapped down. and the world stopped. It wasn't a gradual slowdown. It was instantaneous, like a switch had been flipped. The falling glass, a quarter of the way to the floor, was frozen in midair. A droplet of water clinging to its rim hung suspended, a perfect, glittering jewel. The sound of his mother's gasp was a low, bass hum that vibrated in the air. He could see the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunbeam that cut through the kitchen window, each one a tiny, motionless planet in a sea of gold. The frantic beating of his own heart was the only thing that seemed to be moving at a normal pace. His mind, which had been a chaotic storm, was suddenly a sea of perfect calm. In this frozen moment, he had all the time in the world to think. It's happening again, he realized. Like with the villain. Time has slowed down. No, that wasn't right. He looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand was still. Time hadn't slowed down. He had sped up. He looked back at the glass. It was going to shatter. It would make a mess. Mom would be upset. He should catch it. It was a simple, instinctual thought. Catch the glass? He moved. He didn't mean to. He just did. One moment he was standing by the sink. The next he was slammed against the far wall of the dining room, the impact knocking the wind out of him. A framed photo of him as a child clattered to the floor. The sound of the glass finally shattering on the kitchen tiles echoed like a gunshot in the now silent apartment. "Izuku!" his mother cried, her voice thick with panic. "What was that? Are you all right?" Izuku slid down the wall, his head spinning. He looked at his hands, then back towards the kitchen, a distance of at least 15 feet. He had crossed it in less time than it took a glass to fall 3 feet. He hadn't even felt himself move. There was no sensation of running, no wind resistance. Just a seamless transition from point A to point B. I'm okay, Mom," he called out, his voice shaky. "I just tripped." It was the lamest lie he'd ever told. He got to his feet, his entire body tingling. The energy inside him was fizzing like shaken soda. He needed to get out. He needed to understand. Making an excuse about needing some fresh air, he practically fled the apartment. He didn't take the elevator. He took the stairs, and even walking down them felt agonizingly slow. He burst out into the late afternoon air, his chest tight with a terrifying, exhilarating energy. "I have to test this. I have to know." He found a quiet, deserted stretch of road by the river, a place where people rarely went. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He crouched into what he imagined was a runner's stance, copying the poses he'd seen of speed-type heroes in magazines. "Okay, Izuku," he whispered to himself, his voice trembling. "Just a little run. Down to the end of the block and back. Nice and easy." He pushed off. The world dissolved. Color, sound, and sensation blended into an incomprehensible smear. The familiar neighborhood became a tunnel of blurred greens and grays. The wind wasn't a breeze. It was a solid, crushing wall of force that tried to peel his skin from his bones. The sound of his own feet on the pavement was a continuous, high-pitched scream. He squeezed his eyes shut, overwhelmed and terrified. He didn't know how to stop. He didn't even know how to think. His brain, as fast as it had become, couldn't process the sheer velocity of the sensory input. He flailed, trying to slow down, but it was like trying to stop a bullet with a paper fan. His brief, terrifying run came to an end when his trajectory intersected with a large pile of overflowing trash cans behind a closed restaurant. The impact was cataclysmic. Metal crumpled, garbage exploded outwards in a foul-smelling cloud, and Izuku was sent tumbling head over heels, finally coming to a stop in a heap of discarded vegetable peelings and damp cardboard. He lay there for a full minute, groaning. Every part of him ached. He was covered in filth and smelled like a landfill. He sat up, spitting out a coffee ground. He looked back the way he came. He couldn't even see his starting point. He'd run at least a mile. In about 3 seconds. "Okay," he groaned, pulling a banana peel off his head. "No control. Note to self, learn how to stop." The pain was already fading, the dull ache being replaced by that familiar, energetic buzz. His body was healing, mending the bruises and scrapes from the crash at a visible rate. He could feel it. He could feel the lightning in his veins knitting him back together. This was real. This was his power now. And it was going to kill him if he didn't learn how to use it. That night, Izuku sat at his desk, the glow of his lamp illuminating a fresh, new notebook. The cover was still blank, but he had already written the title on the first page in his neat, meticulous handwriting. Power Analysis for Myself, Volume 1. The old title, Hero Analysis for the Future, felt like it belonged to another lifetime, to another person. He was the subject of his own analysis now. He started with the basics, listing his observations in bullet points. Hypermetabolism, constant hunger. Need for high-calorie intake. Body burns energy at an incredible rate. Is the energy I'm using for speed coming from the food I eat, or is the food just sustaining my body while the energy comes from somewhere else? Where did the lightning come from? Is that the source? Accelerated healing. Bruises from the crash are almost gone. Minor cuts sealed within minutes. Seems linked to the metabolism. Faster processing of nutrients to repair tissue? Super speed, uncontrolled movement is near instantaneous. The world appears to slow down or stop from my perspective when I focus. Is there a limit? How fast can I go? The friction should have ignited my clothes and the air around me. Why didn't it? Is there some kind of protective aura? The golden lightning? Accelerated thought. My mind is moving much faster. I can process information incredibly quickly. This seems to be the key to perceiving the world at high speed. Problem: my body reacts before my conscious mind can catch up. My instincts are faster than my decisions. He tapped his pen against the page, his mind firing on all cylinders. He wasn't just a kid who had gotten a quirk. He was a science experiment. And he, the analyst, was the only one qualified to study it. He thought back to his middle school physics classes. Force equals mass times acceleration. Kinetic energy. Momentum. He started scribbling equations, trying to apply logic to the impossible. The amount of energy required to move his body at the speed he had would be astronomical. The friction, the G-forces, he should have been torn apart. Unless a thought sparked in his mind, wild and fantastical. What if I'm not just moving through space? What if the energy is bending space around me? Protecting me? He remembered the golden aura, the crackling lightning that had wreathed his body in the crater. Maybe that was it. A field of energy that negated the harmful effects of his speed. A speed force, he wrote, then immediately crossed it out. It sounded silly, like something from a comic book. But he couldn't think of a better term. He looked at his hand, flexing his fingers. The buzzing was always there. He wondered if he could control it, call it up without running. He closed his eyes and focused on that internal vibration, that feeling of coiled energy. He tried to make it stronger, to make his hand vibrate. He remembered the heroes he'd studied. Some could vibrate their bodies to become intangible. It was a common application of high-frequency powers. Could he do that? He opened his eyes and held his hand over his desk. He focused, pushing the energy into his palm. A faint tingling started, quickly escalating into a powerful thrumming sensation. He could feel every molecule in his hand oscillating, moving back and forth at a speed he couldn't comprehend. His hand became a blur, a faint golden light shimmering around it. "Whoa!" he whispered. He lowered his hand slowly, hesitantly, towards the solid wood of his desk. He expected resistance. He expected to smash his fingers against the surface. Instead, his hand just sank in. There was no sound, no resistance. It was like phasing through a ghost. The sensation was bizarre, a cold, tingling numbness as his vibrating fingers passed through the equally vibrating molecules of the wood. He could feel the grain, the density of it, but not as a solid object. He felt it as a collection of particles that his own were simply slipping between. He saw the faint golden glow of his hand from inside the desk. He pulled his hand back out just as quickly, his heart hammering against his ribs. The smell of ozone, sharp and clean, filled his room. He stared at his hand, then at the desk. Both were completely solid, completely unharmed. He had just vibrated his hand through a solid object. The sheer, terrifying reality of his new power washed over him. This wasn't just about running fast. This was about rewriting the laws of physics. The potential was limitless. And it was inside him. A quirkless, nerdy, crybaby kid from Muzutafu. A wave of dizziness washed over him. The excitement, the fear, the sheer mental and physical strain of the day was catching up to him. He felt drained, yet simultaneously more energized than ever. He lay back on his bed, his head spinning with possibilities, with questions that had no answers. He closed his eyes, trying to quiet the storm in his mind. He decided to push himself, just a little, to see if he could feel the source of this power again. He reached out with his mind, not to the world around him, but inwards, to the wellspring of lightning that now lived in his soul. The darkness behind his eyelids ignited into a sea of gold. He was no longer in his bedroom. He was adrift in a chaotic, beautiful storm. It was the place from his vision when the lightning first struck, an endless river of kinetic energy, flowing through all of time and space. He saw streaks of light, other runners, their forms indistinct but their presence undeniable. A man in red with a joyful laugh, a grim youth in silver armor. A girl with auburn hair who seemed to flicker in and out of existence. He heard whispers, a torrent of voices echoing through the storm. The formula is the key. 3x2 9yz for A. Gotta keep moving forward, Wally, for Linda. Run, Barry, run! The voices were a symphony of past, present, and future, a chorus of heroes who had all drawn from the same well. It was overwhelming, a billion years of history flooding his senses. He was a single drop of water falling into an infinite ocean. He felt himself dissolving, his consciousness scattering into the current. I'm going to be lost in here, he thought, a wave of pure panic washing over him. And then, a voice cut through the cacophony. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't an echo. It was clear, calm, and grounded. It was tinged with scientific curiosity and a profound, bone-deep confusion. It was a voice that belonged to a man who dealt in facts and was currently confronted with the ultimate impossibility. Who are you? The question wasn't directed at the storm. It was directed at him. A focused, targeted query from somewhere beyond the veil. The connection was too much. The directness of the question, the sheer alien nature of the experience, short-circuited his brain. The golden sea vanished, the whispers faded, and he was plunged back into the darkness of his own mind as he fell into a deep, exhausted unconsciousness. In Central City on Earth 1, Barry Allen slammed his fist on his console, frustrated. Lost it. His lab, once a place of order, was a disaster zone. Wires snaked across the floor, connecting oscilloscopes, frequency modulators, and a half-dozen computers. Charts displaying complex energy waveforms were taped to every available surface. Empty coffee cups and takeout containers formed small mountains on his desk. He hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. The feeling of loss he'd experienced during the storm had become an obsession. A scientific anomaly. His instruments had registered a massive, multidimensional energy spike that had originated in his direct vicinity and then vanished, leaving behind a residual temporal echo that made no sense. It was like a gunshot with a bullet that had traveled sideways through time. He had become convinced that the lightning storm, the particle accelerator, and his own presence had nearly created a gateway to something else, and that something had looked at him, and then chosen to go elsewhere. He couldn't let it go. It was a mystery, and Barry Allen hated unsolved mysteries. So, he built a machine. Working feverishly, he had cobbled together a device designed to track the specific frequency of the energy echo. He called it a trans-dimensional resonance tracker. It was theoretical, it was unstable, and it was probably going to blow every fuse in the building. For hours, he got nothing but static. And then, for a glorious 30 seconds, he'd gotten a lock. The signal was faint, bouncing across the dimensional divide, but it was unmistakably the same energy signature. He'd managed to piggyback a low-frequency audio-visual signal onto his tracking wave, a desperate shot in the dark. It was like trying to see through a keyhole a universe away. He had managed to send a single, simple question before the connection snapped. Who are you? Now, he was trying to clean up the data he'd managed to download in that brief window. He ran decryption algorithms, filtering out layers of interdimensional static. An image began to resolve on his main monitor, grainy and flickering, like an old home movie. The image stabilized. It was a room. A kid's bedroom. It was filled with hero memorabilia, but not the heroes he knew. There was no Superman, no Batman. The central figure on the posters was a giant of a man with a booming smile and V-shaped antennae of blonde hair. The word All Might was plastered everywhere. A different Earth, Barry breathed, his heart pounding. Completely different heroes. The view shifted as the signal momentarily strengthened. He saw the kid. A boy, maybe 14 or 15, with a wild mop of dark green hair and a constellation of freckles on his cheeks. He was lying on his bed, seemingly asleep. He looked ordinary, unremarkable. Barry leaned closer to the screen, his scientific curiosity warring with a strange sense of, he wasn't sure what it was. Not jealousy. Just a profound, aching question. Why? Why there? Why him? As he watched, the boy's eyelids fluttered. And for a single, stunning frame, before the signal overloaded and the screen dissolved into a waterfall of static, the boy's eyes flashed open, and they glowed with a brilliant, impossible, golden light. A light that Barry felt he recognized on a genetic level. A light that felt like a destiny he was meant to have. The feed died. The connection was gone. Barry Allen leaned back in his chair, the stale air of his lab suddenly feeling heavy and significant. He stared at the screen, at the ghost of an afterimage of a green-haired boy with lightning in his eyes. He had found the epicenter of the anomaly. He had found where his lightning had gone. The mystery was no longer about a strange energy reading. It was about a child. A child on another world who, by some impossible twist of fate, now held the power that Barry felt should have been his, and he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Izuku woke up with a gasp, his body lurching into a sitting position. His room was dark, save for the pale moonlight filtering through his window. The All Might posters on his wall seemed to watch him with their eternally optimistic smiles, silent sentinels to his burgeoning madness. The dream, if it could be called a dream, was already fading, but the sensations lingered. The feeling of being in ocean, the chorus of a billion running feet, the storm of golden lightning behind his eyes, and the voice, clear as a bell, cutting through the cosmic static with two simple words, "Who are you?" It hadn't felt like a dream. It had felt like a connection. A question asked across an impossible distance. A violent, rumbling growl erupted from his stomach, pulling him from his metaphysical stupor. It was a hunger so profound it felt like a physical cavern had opened up inside him. His supercharged metabolism was a relentless furnace, and he had just spent the entire night burning fuel on a subconscious, interdimensional joyride. He swung his legs out of bed, the floorboards creaking under his feet. The buzzing energy under his skin was a constant companion now, a low-level thrum that felt like he was perpetually standing too close to a high-voltage transformer. He moved with a quiet urgency, his body craving calories with a primal desperation. Downstairs, the kitchen was an oasis of quiet domesticity. He flicked on the small lamp over the stove, bathing the room in a soft, yellow light. He pulled open the refrigerator and began to eat with a methodical, silent efficiency that would have terrified his mother had she been awake to witness it. A carton of leftover rice, 3 hard-boiled eggs, a half-eaten chicken cutlet, an entire block of tofu. He chased it all down with a liter of milk, chugging it directly from the carton. It barely took the edge off. He was leaning against the counter, contemplating eating a raw onion, when a low humming sound started. It wasn't coming from the refrigerator or the fluorescent lamp. It was coming from everywhere, and nowhere. It was a vibration in the air, a specific frequency that seemed to resonate directly with the energy in his veins. He froze, his senses on high alert. The humming grew subtly louder, and he could pinpoint its source now. It was coming from the living room. From his laptop, which he'd left on the coffee table. His heart began to pound, a frantic, high-speed drum solo against his ribs. This was it. The feeling was the same as in his dream. A connection. He crept into the living room, his bare feet silent on the wooden floor. His laptop screen, which should have been dark in sleep mode, was glowing with a soft blue light. On it, a complex waveform oscillated, a visual representation of the hum that now filled the room. A small text box was blinking in the center of the screen, the cursor a patient, expectant line. Signal detected. Stabilizing connection. Accept incoming transmission? Y/N. Izuku stared at the screen, his mind racing faster than ever. This was impossible. It had to be a virus. Or a quirk. Some kind of technopath was hacking him. But that didn't explain the humming, or the way it felt like it was speaking directly to the lightning inside him. The voice from his dream echoed in his mind. This was its source. He was terrified. Every instinct screamed at him to slam the laptop shut, unplug it, and throw it in the river. But another, stronger instinct, the analyst, the curious student who had filled 13 notebooks with data, was captivated. He had to know. His hand trembling, he reached out and pressed the Y key. The waveform on the screen collapsed, replaced by a burst of static. The humming intensified, and the speakers on his laptop crackled to life, emitting a sound like 1,000 radio stations playing at once. And then, as if a dial had been turned to the correct frequency, the noise coalesced into a single, calm, human voice. Hello? Can you hear me? My name is Barry Allen. I'm a forensic scientist with the Central City Police Department. The voice was American, tinged with a slight Midwest accent. It was steady, professional, but underneath it, Izuku could hear a tremor of profound, barely contained excitement. Izuku was too stunned to speak. He just stared at the screen, which now showed a swirling, abstract pattern of light. Look, I know this is unorthodox. The voice continued, a hint of awkwardness creeping in. I don't know who you are, or even exactly where you are, but my instruments detected a massive energy event in your vicinity. An energy signature that I've been studying for years. I managed to track its resonance signature across, well, I think it's across dimensions. Dimensions. Forensic scientist. Central City. The names meant nothing to Izuku, but the mention of the energy event sent a jolt through him. Who are you? Izuku finally managed to stammer, his voice a dry whisper. How are you doing this? There was a palpable sigh of relief from the speaker. You can hear me. Okay. Good. That's very good. My name is Barry Allen. The how is complicated. It involves quantum entanglement, multiversal resonance theory, and a machine I built in my lab that's probably a serious fire hazard. The important thing is, I track the energy from that lightning strike. Izuku's blood ran cold. The lightning, you know about that? I do, Barry said, his voice becoming more serious. Because I was tracking its trajectory. It wasn't a random bolt of lightning. It was something else. A targeted, focused discharge of cosmic energy, and it was heading directly for my lab. I had all the necessary atmospheric conditions, the right exotic particles in the air from a new particle accelerator, a specific combination of chemicals on a shelf. Everything was perfectly aligned. It was a statistical improbability so vast as to be a certainty. Izuku sank to his knees in front of the coffee table, his eyes wide. He could hear where this was going, and the implication was so massive, so world-altering, that his brain struggled to process it. And then, Barry's voice continued, soft but clear. At the very last microsecond, it swerved. Not in a physical sense. It tore a hole in the fabric of reality and went somewhere else. It went to you. I don't know why. I can't begin to fathom the physics of it. But I know this as surely as I know my own name, that lightning. I think it was meant for me. The words hung in the air, heavier than any physical weight. Meant for him. This incredible, terrifying, miraculous power that had rewritten Izuku's existence was a cosmic delivery sent to the wrong address. It was a gift he had intercepted. It wasn't his. A familiar, crushing wave of guilt and inadequacy washed over him. Of course. It made perfect sense. The universe hadn't chosen a quirkless, useless Deku. It had made a mistake. He was a cosmic fluke, a bug in the system. I didn't. Izuku stammered, tears welling in his eyes. I didn't ask for it. I don't know why it happened. I'm nobody. I'm quirkless. There was a pause on the other end. When Barry spoke again, his voice was softer, gentler. Hey, kid. It's okay. I'm not angry. I'm not accusing you of anything. You hear me? I'm a scientist, and this is the single greatest scientific discovery in the history of any universe. But it's also incredibly dangerous. That power you have, the energy that connects us, I've started calling it the speed force. It's the source of all kinetic energy in the cosmos, a fundamental law of reality that you now have a direct line to, and you have no idea how to control it, do you? Izuku thought of the uncontrolled run, the crash into the trash cans, the accidental phasing of his hand through his desk. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and sniffled. No, he admitted, his voice small. I figured, Barry said. Listen to me. I don't know why the speed force chose you over me. Maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it has a reason. But that doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you have a power that could level a city block if you trip, and you don't have an instruction manual. Well, I think I can help you write one. Izuku looked up, hope warring with his confusion. Help me? Why would you help me? Because I'm the only other person in our respective worlds who has any idea what's happening to you, Barry explained patiently. And because I'm a scientist, I'm staring at the answer to a question I've been asking my whole life, and it's trapped inside a kid who could get himself, and a lot of other people, killed. More importantly, from the little I could see, you seem like a good kid. You seem like you want to do the right thing. I can't experience the speed force myself, but I can study it through you. I can analyze the data, run the numbers, and help you understand the physics of what your body can do. I can be your man in the chair, your lab partner. We can figure this out, together. A man in the chair. A lab partner. From another dimension. A mentor for his power. Izuku's analytical mind, which had been drowning in a sea of guilt and fear, suddenly found a life raft. Data. Analysis. Understanding. This was a language he knew. What do you need me to do? Izuku asked, his voice now steady, the tears forgotten. A chuckle came from the speaker, the first hint of genuine warmth Izuku had heard. Let's start simple. Tell me everything you've experienced so far. Every detail. And don't leave anything out. For the next hour, as the sun began to cast its first gray light over the city of Mizurufu, Izuku Midoriya sat in his living room and confessed his secrets to a stranger from another world. He talked about the villain, the perception of slowed time, the accelerated healing, the uncontrollable speed, the phasing. He read his notes from his new analysis journal, and Barry Allen listened, his mind, a universal way, alight with the fire of discovery. He was no longer the man who had lost his destiny. He was the man who was about to map it. The next day, Izuku was walking on air. The exhaustion and confusion had been replaced by a new, focused energy. He had a partner. A guide. He wasn't alone anymore. He had spent the morning exchanging messages with Barry over a secure text program the scientist had somehow managed to install on his laptop. They were already planning their first controlled experiment, a repeatable test of the molecular phasing he'd discovered. Barry was hypothesizing about resonant frequencies and quantum tunneling, and Izuku was eagerly taking notes, his mind buzzing with a familiar, academic joy. He was so lost in thought, mentally calculating the vibrational frequency needed to pass a spoon through a bowl of Jell-O, that he almost didn't see the figure waiting for him on a bench in his local park. It was All Might, not Tashinori Yagi. This was the full, 10-foot-tall, muscle-bound symbol of peace, his signature smile fixed in place, his presence so immense it seemed to bend the light around him. A few people were staring from a respectful distance, whispering and snapping photos. Izuku's heart leaped into his throat. He stopped, frozen in place. All Might turned his head, his shadowed eyes fixing on him. He beckoned him over. Numbly, Izuku walked over and sat on the far end of the bench, which creaked in protest under the hero's weight. Young Midoriya. All Might's voice boomed, though he seemed to be trying to keep it at a reasonable volume. Thank you for meeting me. He had called Izuku's home phone earlier, a surreal experience in itself, and asked to speak with him. All Might, sir! It's no problem! Izuku squeaked, bowing his head. All Might's smile seemed to soften, losing some of its performative edge. I have been doing a lot of thinking since the incident with the sludge villain. About what I said to you on that rooftop, and about what I saw you do. He turned to face Izuku more directly, his expression turning serious. I was wrong, young Midoriya. I told you that you couldn't be a hero without a quirk. I gave you a practical, logical answer, but I was wrong. A hero's first and most important quality is not their power, but their spirit. Their drive to save others, even at great personal cost. You have that spirit in spades. You proved it when you ran to save your friend, when you moved before your body could think. That is the heart of a true hero. Tears pricked at Izuku's eyes again. He felt like he had been crying for 3 days straight, and then, All Might continued, his voice filled with a profound sense of awe. The world itself seemed to agree with me. That lightning. I have seen many quirks in my day, young Midoriya. I have fought villains who could level mountains and warp reality. But I have never seen anything like what happened to you. It was not a quirk awakening. It was a reward. A calling. He leaned forward, his massive hands resting on his knees. That power you now possess is immense. It is dangerous. And it is wasted on someone who does not know how to wield it for the good of others, which is why I am here. I have a proposition for you. Izuku held his breath. I cannot offer you my quirk, All Might said, and for a moment, Izuku felt a pang of phantom disappointment. My path is set. But I can offer you my guidance. My knowledge. My training. I want to help you hone your power, to gain entrance to UA High, and to become the hero you were so clearly born to be. Let me train you, young Midoriya. Let me help you become a hero. The world seemed to fall away. His dream. His impossible, foolish, childish dream, was being handed to him by his idol, the greatest hero the world had ever known. He had been so focused on the origin of his power, the what and the how, that he hadn't truly considered the what for. This was the what for. The tears finally fell, streaming down his cheeks. He nodded furiously, unable to form words. Why yes! He finally choked out. Yes, please! Thank you! Thank you, All Might! All Might's smile became genuine, a real, heartfelt expression of relief and pride. He placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, and it felt like the weight of the world, a comforting, anchoring weight, had settled upon him. Excellent! The hero boomed. We will start immediately. Your journey to UA begins now. He then coughed, a single droplet of blood landing on the back of his hand, which he quickly wiped away. Now about your power. We need to understand its limits. Show me what you can do. Try to summon that lightning again. Izuku looked at his hands, then back at All Might's expectant face. And for the first time, the two halves of his new reality collided. I can't, Izuku said quietly. All Might's smile faltered. What do you mean you can't? You just need to focus. It's not like that. Izuku tried to explain, his mind racing. He couldn't tell him about Barry. It was too insane. It's not a quirk that I can just turn on and off. It's physics. It's about momentum and vibration. The lightning isn't something I create. It's a byproduct of me moving faster than I should be able to. He was parroting theories Barry had given him just that morning. All Might stared at him, his brow furrowed in confusion. He was a man of action, of punches and smashes. He understood power in its most direct, kinetic form. Vibrations and momentum and physics were the realm of scientists, not heroes like him. He had no frame of reference for what Izuku was describing. I see, he said slowly, though it was clear he didn't. Well, no matter. We will focus on what we can. Heroism is not just about power, it is about strategy. Control. Restraint. I cannot teach you how to run faster, perhaps, but I can teach you how and when to run. I can teach you how to fight, how to save, and most importantly, how to be a symbol that people can rely on. Izuku understood. All Might couldn't be his power's mentor. He didn't have the knowledge. The symbol of peace was going to be his hero mentor. He would teach him about the heart. Barry Allen, the man of science, would teach him about the body. The sheer, beautiful symmetry of it was staggering. He had one teacher for his power, and another for his soul. A cross-dimensional physicist for the theory, and the number one hero for the practical application. That night, Izuku sat at his desk, his new analysis notebook open. The hunger was still there, a constant hum in his belly, but his mind was clear, sharp, and focused. He had a path forward. A daunting, terrifying, exhilarating path. He had spent the afternoon with all might on the shores of Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, a man-made mountain of trash. All Might had laid out a grueling physical conditioning plan. Your body is a machine, young Midoriya, and we must ensure the engine can handle the fuel. But their most important lesson had been a discussion on the ethics of rescue, on prioritizing civilian safety over capturing a villain. Then, he had spent the evening online with Barry, who had walked him through the process of calculating his own kinetic energy output based on his caloric intake. Barry had given him his first real piece of homework, to practice vibrating a single finger at a controlled frequency until he could make it pass through a sheet of paper without tearing it. An exercise in fine control. Izuku picked up his pen. He turned to a fresh page in his notebook and, at the top, wrote a new title, My Hero Training Regimen. Underneath, he made 2 columns. On the left, he wrote, Mentor 1, All Might. Below it, he listed the key points of his training: physical conditioning, combat strategy, rescue ethics, heroism as a symbol, heart. On the right, he wrote, Mentor 2, Barry Allen. Below that, he listed his other curriculum: power control, physics of the speed force, data analysis, molecular/temporal theory, body. He looked at the 2 columns, at the 2 impossible paths that had converged on him. The weight of it all was immense. The secret of his power's origin, the pressure of All Might's expectations, the sheer danger of what his body could do if he lost control for even a second. It was enough to crush anyone. But as he looked at the page, Izuku didn't feel crushed. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a jolt of pure, unadulterated determination that was more powerful than any lightning. He was scared. He was overwhelmed. But he was Izuku Midoriya. He was the boy who ran into the fire without a quirk. Now, he had the fire inside him. And he had 2 of the greatest teachers any universe could offer to show him how to keep it from burning him alive. He picked up a spoon from his desk, holding it in his left hand. He held up the index finger of his right. Okay, Barry, he whispered to the empty room, a small, determined smile on his face. Let's start with the basics. He closed his eyes and focused, trying to find that perfect, resonant hum that would let him bend the laws of reality, just a little bit. His training had begun. 10 months. 10 months of a life lived in dual realities. A carefully balanced existence of the mundane and the miraculous. To the world, Izuku Midoriya was just another determined, slightly obsessive student preparing for the UA High entrance exam. He followed All Might's grueling American dream plan, hauling discarded refrigerators and rusted car chassis across the trash-strewn sands of Dagoba Beach. He grew stronger, his once wiry frame filling out with lean, dense muscle. He was still freckled, still prone to muttering, but the perpetual slouch of uncertainty in his posture had been replaced by a coiled, ready stillness. But in the quiet solitude of the cleaned-up beach, in the privacy of his own room, or in the dead of night at an abandoned industrial park, he lived another life. This was the life guided by the disembodied voice of Barry Allen, a life measured in nanoseconds and quantum frequencies. This was the life of the impossible. Think of the speed force as a physical dimension, Izuku, Barry's voice would explain through a specially modified, phase-tuned earbud that was now Izuku's constant companion. When you run, you're not just moving through space. You're dipping your toes into that dimension. The faster you go, the deeper you go. The aura that protects you from friction and G-forces? That's the speed force itself, clinging to you, creating a pocket of its own reality around your body. Under Barry's tutelage, Izuku's control had grown from non-existent to rudimentary, then to painstaking and precise. The first month had been dedicated solely to learning how to stop. It was a terrifying process of trial and error that involved several high-speed collisions with padded walls Barry had instructed him to build from salvaged mattresses. He learned that stopping wasn't about applying brakes. It was about consciously exiting the speed force dimension, letting the normal laws of friction and inertia reclaim him. After that came the true lessons. He learned to control his molecular vibrations, starting with passing his finger through paper, then glass, then wood, and finally, after 6 agonizing months, a thin sheet of steel. He learned to create speed mirages, leaving behind after images of himself by moving back and forth between 2 points faster than the human eye could track. He learned that the lightning he generated wasn't just a byproduct, it was a weapon. He could channel the kinetic energy he built up and discharge it from his fingertips, a focused, non-lethal arc of golden electricity. All Might, for his part, was a fountain of heroic wisdom and raw physical training. He saw Izuku's progress as the result of a truly unique activation-type quirk combined with sheer, unadulterated grit. He didn't understand the physics, but he understood the results. He saw the boy's reflexes sharpen to an inhuman degree, his movements becoming fluid and impossibly efficient. He taught Izuku how to throw a punch, not with the brute force of a smash, but with the snap and precision of a seasoned fighter. He drilled him on situational awareness, on how to analyze a battlefield, on the weight and responsibility that came with power. The two mentorships, one of heart and one of science, braided together to forge something new in Izuku. He was no longer just a fanboy who analyzed heroes. He was a student of heroism itself, from its quantum mechanical foundations to its philosophical peak. And now, after 10 months of sweat, blood, tears, and several thousand protein bars, the day had come. He stood before the towering gates of UA High, the sun glinting off its H-shaped main building. It was a beacon, a dream made manifest in glass and steel. He took a deep breath, the air buzzing with the nervous energy of hundreds of other hopefuls. "You ready for this, kid?" Barry's voice was a low, comforting hum in his ear. "Heart rate is a little high. 160 BPM. Try some of those breathing exercises we worked on." "I'm fine, Barry," Izuku muttered under his breath, drawing a few strange looks from nearby students. "Just a lot to take in. I get it. It's your big day. Just remember the plan. Control over power. Precision over speed. You're not here to show off, you're here to show you're a hero." "Right. Precision," Izuku repeated, his personal mantra for the day. A sharp, angry voice cut through his focus. "Out of my way, Deku." Izuku turned to see Katsuki Bakugo striding past, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, a thunderous scowl etched on his face. The past 10 months had been strange for their relationship. After the sludge villain incident, Bakugo had mostly avoided him, his usual explosive taunts replaced by a simmering, confused silence. He had seen the impossible, and his pride wouldn't let him acknowledge it, but his mind couldn't forget it. He had thrown himself into his own training with a renewed, almost manic ferocity, as if trying to physically outmuscle a miracle. "Keikaken! Good luck!" Izuku stammered out, a force of old habit. Bakugo just grunted, not breaking stride. But as he passed, his crimson eyes flickered towards Izuku, a silent, burning question in them. "What are you?" Izuku was about to take his first step onto the hallowed grounds when his foot caught on an uneven paving stone. He pitched forward, a sudden, clumsy lurch towards the ground. Oh, great start, he thought, his life flashing before his eyes in a montage of embarrassing social failures. He never hit the ground. A warm hand gently touched his shoulder, and the sensation of falling simply stopped. He felt a strange, light feeling, as if gravity had momentarily forgotten about him. "Whoa there! Are you okay?" a cheerful, friendly voice asked. He was gently righted, and found himself looking into the warm, brown eyes of a girl with a round face and a permanent pink blush on her cheeks. "Achiko Uraraka. Sorry for using my quirk on you without asking," she said, pressing her fingertips together to release him. "But it's bad luck to fall on the first day, right?" Thank you," Izuku stuttered, his face immediately turning the color of a ripe tomato. She gave him a bright, encouraging smile. "Well, good luck in there. Let's do our best." She then bounced off towards the entrance, full of positive energy. Izuku stood frozen for a moment, his heart doing a frantic tap dance. "Well, she seems nice," Barry commented drily in his ear. Heart rate just spiked to 190. "You sure you're not having a medical event?" "I'm fine," Izuku hissed, shaking his head and hurrying inside, his face burning. The practical exam. A sprawling, full-scale replica of a cityscape, divided into multiple battle centers. 7 minutes to score as many points as possible by disabling robotic villains. 1-pointers, 2-pointers, and 3-pointers, each escalating in size and difficulty. Simple, direct, a pure test of combat prowess. Izuku stood with his group before the massive gates of Battle Center B, stretching his legs and trying to ignore the intimidating quirks being shown off by the other examinees. A boy with engines in his calves, a girl who could pull a cannon out of her stomach. He, by comparison, just looked like a nervous kid in a green tracksuit. Remember, Izuku, Barry's voice coached, a calm island in his sea of anxiety. Your problem isn't power. It's restraint. Any one of these robots, you could probably hit with enough kinetic force to send it into low orbit. But that's not the goal. The goal is to disable, not obliterate. Think like a surgeon, not a sledgehammer. Surgeon, right? Izuku muttered, shaking out his hands. Present mixed voice boomed from unseen speakers. And begin! The massive gates slid open. While the other students hesitated for a moment, confused by the lack of a countdown, Izuku was already moving. He didn't run. Not in the traditional sense. He simply accelerated. To the other examinees, it was as if he had vanished. One moment he was there, a green blur at the starting line. The next, he was gone. To Izuku, the world snapped into the familiar, silent, slow-motion ballet of the Speed Force. The other students were statues. The wind was a gentle caress. The city spread out before him, a massive, silent playground. He could see every street, every alley, every robot lurking around every corner. His mind, processing information at a rate that would make a supercomputer smoke, mapped it all out in a fraction of a second. Okay, Barry, I'm in, he subvocalized, the words forming in his mind and being picked up by the advanced microphone in his earbud. I've identified 12 one-pointers and 7 two-pointers in a 3-block radius. Copy that, Barry replied. Target the nearest cluster. And remember precision. A trio of one-pointers swiveled to face him, their single red optical sensors glowing menacingly. They raised their machine gun arms, but to Izuku, they were moving through molasses. He pushed off, a faint trail of golden lightning tracing his path along the asphalt. He didn't aim for the center mass of the first robot. He moved in a tight, corkscrewing arc, his target a single, exposed hydraulic line on the machine's leg joint. He flicked it with 2 fingers, a tiny, almost delicate tap that carried the kinetic energy of a speeding car. Crack! The hydraulic line shattered. The robot's leg buckled, and it crashed to the ground, immobile. 1 point. He was already at the second robot before the first had finished falling. This time, he vibrated his hand, a technique he had practiced for hundreds of hours. His hand became a golden, blurry phantom. He didn't punch the robot. He simply shoved his vibrating hand straight through its chest plate. The sensation was a cold, tingling vibration. He solidified his hand for a nanosecond, grabbing a handful of wiring and yanking it out, before phasing his hand back out. The robot's red eye flickered and died. 2 points. The third one he dispatched with a bolt of lightning, a controlled arc that leaped from his fingertip to the robot's primary optic sensor, frying its circuitry with a crisp zap. 3 points. Total time elapsed, 0.8 seconds. He moved through the city like a ghost, a phantom of efficient destruction. He never used more force than was absolutely necessary. A high-speed strike to a joint. A phased hand to rip out a power core. A precise electrical discharge to short out a motherboard. He disassembled the robots, leaving them in neat, twitching piles of parts rather than craters of twisted metal. It was a display of utter, terrifying control. From the observation room, the UA faculty watched their monitors in stunned silence. Who is this kid? Midnight breathed, leaning forward. His quirk was registered as super speed, but this is something else. He's not just running. He's thinking at that speed too. Look at the efficiency, Nizu, the principal, chimed in, his beady eyes gleaming with intellectual delight. He's not wasting a single joule of energy. Every movement is deliberate, precise. He's dismantling the machines like a master watchmaker. Shota Aizawa narrowed his eyes, his gaze fixed on the monitor showing Izuku's feed. He saw a flicker of gold, a brief afterimage, a robot falling apart for no discernible reason. It was powerful, yes, frighteningly so. But it was also controlled, methodical. It wasn't the reckless, self-destructive power he so often saw in new students. Still, it was illogical. The sheer energy output was off the charts for a first-time user. Aizawa was deeply, profoundly wary. Meanwhile, on the ground, Bakugo was a whirlwind of explosive fury. Die! He screamed, blasting a two-pointer to smithereens with a massive explosion from his palms. He was racking up points at an incredible rate, his combat instincts honed and razor-sharp. He felt the familiar thrill of battle, the joy of overwhelming power. He was the best. He had to be. Then he saw it. A flicker of green and gold at the end of the street. A three-pointer, a hulking, tank-like machine, suddenly seized up, its lights going dark before it simply fell over. And there, for a split second, was Deku, standing over it before he vanished again. Bakugo's blood ran cold. He had been telling himself a story for the past 10 months. He told himself that what he saw at the sludge villain incident was a one-time fluke. A freak quirk awakening that was all flash and no substance. He'd convinced himself that his own hard work, his own power, was superior. But this was no fluke. This was control. This was power on a level he couldn't even comprehend. Deku wasn't just blasting things apart like he was. He was moving faster than Bakugo's explosions could travel, ending fights before they even began. He was fighting with an elegance and precision that made Bakugo's own powerful, straightforward style feel like a child throwing a tantrum. His worldview, which had been so carefully rebuilt, shattered for the second time. This wasn't a rival he could overcome with more training. This wasn't a pebble he could kick out of his way. This was something else entirely. It was like watching a human try to compete with a hurricane. A primal scream of pure, unadulterated rage tore from his throat. DKU, he blasted himself into the air, propelled by his explosions, trying to catch a glimpse of the green streak that was methodically cleaning out the entire battle center. Where did you get that power, DKU? He roared at the empty streets, his voice echoing off the fake buildings. It wasn't a question for an answer. It was a demand to the universe, a protest against the fundamental injustice of it all. The quirkless, useless Deku was now a god of speed, and Katsuki Bakugo had never felt so slow. 5 minutes in. You've racked up 76 points, Barry's voice said calmly. You've disabled every robot in this sector. I think you've made your point. Maybe find a nice rooftop and sit the rest of this out. No, Izuku replied, his breathing steady, his body thrumming with contained energy. A real hero doesn't stop when the job is done. He makes sure everyone is safe. I'm going to do a sweep. Look for anyone in trouble. Good answer, Barry said, a hint of pride in his voice. Izuku dashed to the top of the tallest building, the world slowing to a crawl around him. He scanned the cityscape below. He saw Bakugo, a furious comet of orange and smoke. He saw the boy with the engine legs sprinting impressively down a main thoroughfare. And then he saw her. It was the girl from the entrance. Uraraka. She was trapped, her leg caught under a large piece of rubble. And looming over her, casting a shadow that swallowed the entire street, was the zero-pointer. The ground shook as the colossal robot, the exam's gimmick obstacle, took a step forward. It was the size of a skyscraper, a mountain of chrome and servos designed to be avoided, not fought. Its massive hand swung down, aiming to crush the trapped girl. The other students were running away, screaming. It was the logical thing to do. The machine was worth 0 points. Fighting it was pointless. Suicidal, Barry Izuku said, his voice deadly calm. I see a civilian in distress. I see it too, Barry replied, his own tone shifting, all traces of casualness gone. That thing is massive. A direct kinetic strike is too risky. You could bring the whole block down on top of her. I know, Izuku said. He watched the massive fist descend. Time seemed to stretch into infinity. He saw the terror on Uraraka's face. He saw the path of the falling debris. He saw a dozen different possibilities, 1,000 different calculations, all in the span of a single heartbeat. A punch was crude. All Might would have punched it. But he wasn't just All Might's student. He was Barry's too. He had a better idea. He pushed off the rooftop, not towards the robot, but towards the ground. He landed silently, 100 yards away from the unfolding disaster. What are you doing, Izuku? Barry asked, a note of concern in his voice. You taught me that the speed force is the source of all kinetic energy, Izuku explained, his body dropping into a low, coiled stance. I can absorb it, and I can redirect it. He began to run. Not in a straight line, but in a circle. A tight, perfect circle, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. He picked up speed, going from a blur to a streak of pure, green and gold light. Faster and faster he went, pouring more and more of the speed force into his momentum. The air began to move. A small breeze kicked up, then a gust, then a gale. Within seconds, Izuku had become the epicenter of a miniature tornado. The vortex of wind, a swirling cone of raw kinetic energy, grew in size and power, kicking up dust and debris. It screamed with the sound of a jet engine. In the observation room, the faculty were on their feet. "What is he doing?" Aizawa demanded, his eyes wide behind his goggles. "He's creating a cyclonic vortex." Power Loader yelled. "The wind shear at the center of that must be incredible. He's weaponizing the air itself." Izuku, a living dynamo at the heart of the storm, angled the vortex. He wasn't aiming at the robot's body. He was aiming at its massive, descending arm. The tornado slammed into the zero-pointer's arm. The colossal limb, which weighed thousands of tons, was hit by a focused blast of wind moving at supersonic speeds. It was knocked sideways, its trajectory completely altered. The massive fist missed Uraraka by a dozen yards, smashing into an empty building and bringing it down in a shower of concrete and steel. But Izuku wasn't done. The building was collapsing towards her. He broke from his circle, the vortex dissipating instantly. He moved, a silent flash of gold. He arrived at Uraraka's side in the frozen moment between the building's collapse and the debris hitting the ground. "Hold on," he said. Her eyes widened as he appeared before her as if from nowhere. He placed one hand on her shoulder and the other on the slab of concrete trapping her leg. "Vibrate," he commanded himself. He poured the speed force into his body, not as momentum, but as pure, high-frequency oscillation. He and Uraraka were both wreathed in a soft, golden glow. He phased his own hand through the concrete, grabbing her ankle. Then, he pulled her free, her now intangible legs sliding effortlessly through the solid rock. At the same time, he phased them both through the shower of falling debris. Chunks of concrete and rebar the size of cars passed harmlessly through their shimmering forms. He deposited her a safe distance away and solidified, the golden aura fading. He stood protectively in front of her as the dust settled. The entire sequence, from the creation of the vortex to the rescue, had taken less than 4 seconds. He turned to her, his heart still hammering from the exertion. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Uraraka could only stare, her mind completely unable to process what had just happened. This boy, the clumsy, nervous boy from the entrance, had just commanded a tornado and walked through solid matter to save her. Before she could answer, President Mick's voice screamed through the speakers, signaling the end of the exam. "Time's up." Izuku stood there, panting slightly, the adrenaline starting to fade. He had done it. He had saved someone. He hadn't just used his power, he had used his head. He had been a hero. A sudden, intense wave of nausea and hunger hit him, and he swayed on his feet. "Whoa, easy there," Uraraka said, pushing herself up and grabbing his arm to steady him. "You saved me. That was amazing. You were like, whoosh. And then the wind was like whoosh. And then you were all sparkly and went right through the wall." She gestured enthusiastically, her earlier fear replaced by bubbly, breathless awe. Izuku just gave her a weak, tired smile. From a distant rooftop, a figure watched. It was a blur of yellow, a man-shaped distortion in the air that seemed to vibrate with a palpable, venomous energy. His eyes glowed a malevolent, burning red. He had been drawn here by the colossal spike of speed force energy, a lighthouse in the cosmic dark. His head was tilted, as if listening to something only he could hear. The timeline. It was screaming. It was wrong. This child, this anomaly, was wielding the power that was meant to create his nemesis, the power he had dedicated his entire existence to understanding and surpassing. But it was different now. Tainted. "The timeline is wrong," the yellow blur whispered, his voice a distorted, chilling hiss that sounded like grinding glass. "The speed force is tainted. Its purity, its legacy, is being squandered." His burning red eyes narrowed, focusing on the small, green-haired boy who was now being helped by the girl he had just saved. "Who is this child?" The reverse flash snarled, not with curiosity, but with the cold, murderous fury of a zealot whose sacred text had just been desecrated, and in that moment, Eobard Thawne found a new purpose. If the past had been broken, he would not fix it. He would dissect it. He would study the flaw, understand its weakness, and then he would rip it out of the timeline, root and stem. The first week at UA High felt like a fever dream. Izuku walked the hallowed halls not as a visitor, but as a student. He was in Class 1A, the hero course, surrounded by the best of the best. He had a real student ID, a desk with his name on it, and a homeroom teacher who looked like he perpetually needed a nap and a gallon of coffee. It was everything he had ever wanted, and it was utterly terrifying. His performance in the entrance exam had made him a minor legend before he'd even attended his first class. He'd scored first in the practical, not just through villain points, of which he had a staggering 76, but also through the 60 rescue points awarded for his selfless and brilliant rescue of Ochako Uraraka, a new record. The story of the boy who had created a tornado and phased through a collapsing building had spread like wildfire. He was the talk of the school, but it was a quiet, wary kind of talk. He wasn't mobbed for autographs, he was observed from a distance. His power was too immense, too outside the normal spectrum of quirks, to be easily understood. To his classmates, he was an enigma, a powerhouse of unknown origin and uncertain limits. Shota Aizawa, his homeroom teacher, was the most wary of all. During the initial quirk apprehension test on the first day, Aizawa had watched Izuku with an unnerving, analytical stillness. Izuku, following Barry's advice, had deliberately held back. He'd used his speed in controlled, minute bursts, a fractional phase shift to get a better grip on the weight machines, a precisely timed burst of speed for the 50-meter dash that was just shy of the sound barrier, a carefully modulated vibration to score infinitely on the sidestep test. He demonstrated incredible capability without revealing the cosmic, reality-bending truth of his power. Aizawa had seen enough. He'd cornered Izuku after the test, his eyes glowing a faint red under his goggles, his capture weapon writhing slightly. Midoriya. Your quirk registration is listed as super speed. That's a gross oversimplification. You can generate wind funnels, discharge electricity, and it looked very much like you made your hand intangible during the grip strength test. Your file is also flagged for anomalous quirk emergence. You have a lot of power for someone who has supposedly had it for less than a year. Don't think for a second I'm not watching you. One slip up, one instance of losing control, and I will erase that power and expel you before you can blink. You are a logical improbability, and I don't like variables I can't account for. The threat was real, and Izuku felt its weight. It was another layer of pressure, another secret to keep. His relationship with Bakugo had solidified into a tense, volatile stalemate. Bakugo, who had also passed with flying colors, seethed with a quiet, volcanic rage. He refused to speak to Izuku, refused to even look at him, but Izuku could feel the weight of his glare from across the classroom. It was the glare of a king who had been inexplicably usurped by a peasant. During Aizawa's test, Bakugo had been explosive and powerful, but his results were overshadowed by Izuku's quiet, effortless perfection. The humiliation was a poison in his veins, and it was all directed at the green-haired boy who was the source of his existential crisis. Amidst the tension and the pressure, however, there were bright spots. Uraraka was in his class, her bubbly, down-to-earth personality a welcome anchor in the sea of intensity. Tenya Ida, the stern, engine-legged boy from the exam, had gone from berating him for muttering during the orientation to becoming a fast, if overly formal, friend after witnessing his heroic spirit. He was slowly, tentatively, finding his place. He was sitting in the cafeteria with Ida and Uraraka, trying to explain to Barry via sub-vocalization why Japanese school lunches were nutritionally superior to American ones, when the alarms blared. Warning! Level 3 security breach. All students, please evacuate to your designated shelters in an orderly fashion. The cafeteria erupted into chaos. Students scrambled, shouting and pushing. Izuku, Ida, and Uraraka were swept up in the tide of bodies flowing towards the emergency exits. It's probably just the press again, Uraraka said, trying to stay calm. They've been trying to get interviews about All Might being a teacher here. A level 3 breach is unprecedented for mere reporters. Ida chopped the air with his hand. This is a serious lapse in UA's security protocols. Izuku, however, felt a cold dread snake its way up his spine. The air felt strange. It was a feeling he was becoming familiar with, a subtle vibration, a faint scent of ozone, the telltale sign of the speed force being manipulated nearby. "Barry, are you picking this up?" he muttered, his voice masked by the surrounding din. Loud and clear, Barry's voice replied, "All business. There's a massive tachyon energy signature building somewhere on campus. Tachyons are theoretical particles that move faster than light. They're a key indicator of speed force usage, especially time travel. But this signature is messy. Unstable. It feels wrong." Before Izuku could respond, the lights in the hallway flickered and died, plunging them into the dim, red glow of the emergency lighting. The panicked shouting of the students intensified. And then, a new sound cut through the chaos. A high-pitched, electric hum, like a swarm of angry hornets the size of airplanes. A streak of yellow lightning, jagged and angry compared to his own smooth gold, tore through the hallway at the far end of the corridor. It moved with impossible speed, carving a sizzling, ozone-scented path through the air. It was there and gone in a flash, but in its wake, a dozen students were left sprawled on the ground, groaning, not seriously injured but dazed and disoriented, as if they'd been hit by a non-lethal shockwave. The yellow streak appeared again, this time at their end of the hall, coalescing into the form of a man. He was tall and lean, clad in a sleek, tactical suit of a sickening, bile yellow color. The design was a corrupted mockery of a classic hero costume, with jagged, crimson lightning bolt accents that seemed to cut into the yellow. His face was obscured by a cowl, but the openings for his eyes burned with a malevolent, crimson light that seemed to suck the very warmth from the air. He was vibrating, his entire form blurring at the edges, making him difficult to look at directly. The electric hum was radiating from him, a sound of pure, concentrated malice. The students around Izuku screamed and scrambled back. Ida instinctively moved in front of Uraraka, his engines revving. Izuku stood his ground, his blood turning to ice. He could feel it. The raw, undiluted power coming off this man was the speed force, but it was a version that had been twisted, inverted, turned into something negative and hateful. The man in yellow ignored the other students. His glowing red eyes scanned the crowd, dismissing each terrified face, until they landed on Izuku. They stopped. The vibration of his body seemed to intensify, the humming rising in pitch. He had found what he was looking for. "There you are," the man's voice was a distorted, chilling hiss, like a recording played in reverse. It was the same voice from the rooftop after the exam. The aberration. The paradox. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, and a crowd of students parted before him like the Red Sea. Izuku knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this was not a villain from his world. This was something else. Something that had followed the trail of his power from across the universe. "Who are you?" Izuku demanded, his own body beginning to thrum with golden energy, a subconscious, defensive reaction. The man let out a dry, rasping laugh. "Who am I? I am the man who should have been. I am the future. I am the one who understands this power you have stumbled into like a child finding his father's gun. You can call me," the reverse flash. Barry's voice in his ear was tight with a dread that transcended dimensions. "Izuku, get away from him. Now. That's, oh God, that's Eobard. You know him?" Izuku subvocalized, his eyes never leaving the vibrating yellow figure. "Know him? In my original timeline, the one you overwrote, he was supposed to be my arch-nemesis. He's a historian from the 25th century, obsessed with the Flash, who replicated the accident that was supposed to give me my powers. He's a psychopath, Izuku, a sociopath with the power to rewrite history on a whim. He's faster than you, he's more experienced, and he is utterly ruthless." The reverse flash tilted his head, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Chatting with your ghost, little anomaly? Your cross-dimensional crutch? Tell the failed scientist that he can't hide you from me." He knew about Barry. The realization hit Izuku like a physical blow. This wasn't just a random attack. It was personal. It was targeted. I don't know what you're talking about, Izuku said, trying to buy time, trying to get his classmates to safety. But you need to leave. You're trespassing at UA. Thawne chuckled again. UA? This school? This entire timeline? It's all just a bad dream, a cosmic mistake. The Speed Force is a thing of purity, of legacy. It chooses champions, scientists, men of destiny. It was meant for Barry Allen. And when I learned I couldn't be him, I was content to be his opposite, his rival. My entire existence was defined by the Flash. And then, you happened. A quirkless, crying child from a backwater dimension somehow stole that destiny. You broke history. You broke me. I've spent months observing this pathetic little timeline, trying to understand, why? Why you? He was a zealot, Izuku realized. A man whose entire religion had been invalidated, and he was staring at the heresy that had caused it. Without another word, Thawne vanished. He didn't run, he was simply gone. Izuku's enhanced senses barely registered a flicker of yellow. An instant later, a searing pain erupted in his left shoulder. He cried out, stumbling back. He looked down and saw Thawne standing behind him now, his hand vibrating with crimson energy, smoke rising from where he had just jabbed Izuku. Too slow, the reverse flash hissed. He moved again. A blur. A series of brutal, precise strikes landed on Izuku's body. One to his ribs, cracking them. One to his leg, buckling his knee. One to his jaw, snapping his head back. Each blow landed with the force of a jackhammer, delivered so quickly that Izuku only registered the impacts, not the motion. He was completely outclassed. It was like trying to fight a ghost made of lightning. Fight back, little hero! Thawne taunted, appearing in front of him again, a condescending smirk audible in his distorted voice. Show me the power that the universe thought was so special. Izuku pushed off, trying to create distance, trying to enter the relative calm of his speed time. But it didn't work. As he accelerated, the world around him remained a blur. Thawne was moving with him, matching his speed perfectly, keeping the world at a frantic, chaotic pace. It was like being trapped in a cage match at the speed of light. You think this is your power to command? Thawne snarled, grabbing Izuku by the throat and slamming him against the wall, the plaster cracking around them. This is my world. My element. I was born in this storm. You were just adopted by it. Izuku, you have to run! Barry pleaded in his ear. You can't win this. He's drawing on the negative speed force. It's a parasitic, corrupting version of your own power. He's leeching your momentum. Thawne's red eyes seemed to glow brighter. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The Speed Force chose a crying child over a man of science? Over me? It is the ultimate insult. I will spend an eternity taking you apart, piece by piece, molecule by molecule, until I understand its mistake. And then, I will correct it. I will take the Speed Force from your cooling corpse, and I will become the one true god of speed. He raised his other hand, the fingers vibrating so intensely they looked like a crimson blade. He was aiming for Izuku's heart. At that moment, a massive shape slammed into the hallway. I am here! All Might had arrived, his smile a furious, determined grimace. He had clearly just transformed, his suit slightly askew. He had seen the security breach and rushed to the scene, only to find this bizarre yellow villain holding his student by the throat. Texas smash! He roared, throwing a punch so powerful it compressed the air in the hallway into a solid wall of force. Thawne, with a look of pure contempt, simply phased through the attack. The blast of air pressure shot past him, blowing out all the windows at the far end of the corridor, and sending a hurricane-force whine through the school. He tossed Izuku aside like a ragdoll, and the boy crumpled to the floor, his shoulder screaming in pain, his ribs on fire. The symbol of peace, Thawne spat, turning his attention to the number one hero. A lumbering, muscle-bound relic. Your power is finite. It has a limit. Mine does not. He vibrated, his form becoming slightly intangible. Tell me, All Might, have you ever tried to punch a ghost? He shot forward, a yellow streak that ran circles around the hero. All Might was a powerhouse, one of the strongest beings on the planet, but he was trying to fight a concept. He threw punch after punch, each one powerful enough to level a building, but Thawne was never there. He was everywhere at once, a phantom delivering 1,000 tiny, stinging blows that bypassed All Might's durability by vibrating through his skin. "It's no use," Izuku gasped, trying to push himself up. He could see it. All Might was too strong, but he was also too slow, too solid. He looked at his classmates, Ida and Uraraka and the others, who were huddled at the end of the hall, horrified but unable to flee, trapped by the sheer spectacle of the battle. They were in danger. Everyone was in danger. He had to do something. "Barry, what do I do?" he whispered, his vision swimming. "You can't match his speed, and you can't match his ruthlessness," Barry said, his voice strained with the effort of thinking at this velocity. "So don't. Do something he won't expect. You're an analyst, Izuku. Analyze him, analyze him." Izuku's mind latched onto the word. He forced himself into a half-crouch, his eyes darting back and forth, trying to track the yellow blur. He couldn't see the man, but he could see the effects, the flicker of red light, the scent of ozone, the way the air distorted around him. Thawne wasn't just fast. He was arrogant. He was toying with All Might, reveling in his own superiority. He was monologuing, taunting, his movements becoming slightly more theatrical, more predictable. He had a pattern. A series of 3 high-speed jabs followed by a phase shift to avoid the counterattack. Izuku saw it. It was a tiny window, less than a picosecond, but to him, it was a gaping opportunity. He pushed the pain down. He focused all the speed force he could muster not into his legs, but into his right arm. Golden lightning, brighter and more intense than he had ever summoned, crackled around his fist. "All Might! Left hook! Now!" he screamed. All Might, trusting his student without hesitation, roared and threw a massive left hook at the empty space where Thawne was about to reappear. Just as he predicted, Thawne phased back into reality right in the path of the punch, a cruel laugh already forming in his throat. He saw the punch coming, of course. It was pathetically slow. He was about to vibrate through it, and deliver a devastating blow to All Might's exposed side. But he hadn't accounted for Izuku. In that infinitesimal moment, Izuku moved. He didn't try to cross the distance. He didn't need to. He discharged the lightning from his fist. It wasn't a bolt. It was a flash flood of pure, golden kinetic energy. A wave of speed force, untainted by negativity, that erupted across the space between them. It wasn't meant to injure Thawne, it was meant to disrupt him. The golden energy slammed into the reverse flash just as he was beginning his phase shift. The two opposing frequencies, the pure speed force and its negative counterpart, collided. For a split second, Thawne's powers short-circuited. His molecular control failed. He was forced into a solid state, directly in the path of All Might's fist. His red eyes widened in genuine shock. It was the first time in centuries he had ever been surprised in a fight. All Might's punch connected. The sound was like a thunderclap and a church bell ringing at the same time. The full, unadulterated power of the number one hero, concentrated on a single, solid point. The yellow villain was launched backwards like a cannonball, a streak of screaming light that smashed through the wall at the end of the corridor, then another, and another. He shot through the entire school building and out the other side, finally crashing into the forest of the UA grounds nearly a mile away. The hallway fell silent, the only sound the ragged, steaming breaths of All Might and the pained gasps of Izuku. All Might turned, his smile gone, replaced by a look of grim concern. He looked at Izuku, then at the massive, villain-shaped holes that now ran through his school. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this was no ordinary villain. Izuku pushed himself to his feet, leaning against the wall for support. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain was coming back in waves. He had cracked ribs, a sprained knee, and a shoulder that felt like it had been branded with a hot iron. But he was alive. They were all alive. He knew this wasn't over. Thawne was too powerful to be taken out by a single punch, even from All Might. This was just the first encounter. A brutal, terrifying lesson. From the woods, a faint yellow glow could be seen. Thawne was getting up. But he wasn't coming back. Not now. He had what he wanted, a baseline reading of his enemy's power. He had delivered his message. Before the yellow light vanished for good, a final, distorted message echoed in Izuku's head, transmitted on a frequency only he and Barry could hear. It wasn't a shout. It was a cold, chilling promise. Tell your ghost mentor he can't hide you from me. The light disappeared. The oppressive hum in the air faded. The reverse flash was gone. Izuku slid down the wall, his strength finally giving out. Uraraka and Ida rushed to his side, their faces pale with shock and concern. Teachers and other pro-heroes were arriving now, their expressions grim. All Might stood over him, a giant, protective shadow, his face a thunderous mask of fury at the violation of his school and the attack on his student. Izuku looked down at his trembling hands, at the faint golden sparks that still danced around his knuckles. He had survived. He had even managed to land a hit. But he had learned a terrible, brutal lesson. There were things in the universe far more dangerous than sludge villains and giant robots. And one of them now knew his name. His power was not just a gift, it was a beacon, and it had just attracted a monster from the future.